Have you ever wondered what happens in the brain the moment you decide to stop chasing people and start chasing purpose? There's something biologically profound that occurs right at the level of your prefrontal cortex, a shift, a reorganization, a signal to evolve. Because here's the truth. The moment you begin to focus on yourself, truly focus, not in some vague motivational sense, but neurologically, psychologically, behaviorally, everything changes. Not just the way you feel, but how you operate, how you see, how you choose. You see, our brains are wired to seek validation. From an evolutionary standpoint, being part of a group was survival. Rejection once meant death. But today, chasing people who devalue is no longer survival. It's self-sabotage. And your nervous system doesn't know the difference. That's the paradox. That's the trap. So what happens when you stop running after people who don't see you? Your dopamine system recalibrates. Your reward pathways realign. You begin to derive satisfaction not from external approval, but from internal progress. And that is the most sustainable, neurochemically sound of motivation available to you. Because unlike people, progress doesn't ghost you. Discipline doesn't betray you. The pursuit of mastery doesn't grow distant. Every time you decide to train your focus back inward to your goals, your health, your craft, you are literally strengthening neural circuits in the brain, circuits for resilience, for clarity, for long-term fulfillment. You're not just becoming stronger emotionally. You're becoming stronger biologically. Let them go. Let the ones who don't value your presence fall away. Let the ones who only come around when it's convenient for them find comfort elsewhere. Let them misunderstand you, mislabel you, walk away from you. That's not your trauma to carry, and that's data. That's information. That's the environment showing you what belongs and what doesn't. And when you stop trying to control who stays and who leaves, you reclaim all that wasted cognitive bandwidth. You gain back your time, your mental energy, your creative power, and you can now reinvest it in your growth, in your habits, in your healing. In your healing, this is not selfishness. It's neural optimization. It's biological intelligence. You are not here to be liked by everyone. You are here to become who you were designed to be. And that path, it requires friction. It requires solitude. It requires moments of discomfort where you choose discipline over distraction, self-respect over chasing, purpose over popularity. So focus on yourself. Let them go. Because you don't build a legacy chasing noise. You build it by becoming so grounded in who you are that nothing, no opinion, no silence, no departure can shake your focus. Have you ever noticed what actually happens? In real time, in your brain the moment you decide to stop obsessing over who's texting you back, who's watching your stories, who's staying or leaving, there's something deeply biological at play, something we can map on fMRI. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive function, focus, and long-term decision-making, starts to re-engage. Why? Because it's no longer hijacked by the amygdala, the threat detection system that lights up every time you feel ignored, abandoned, or unseen. When you focus on yourself instead of others' validation, you're not just making a motivational choice, you're initiating a neural shift. You're literally turning down the volume on systems that evolved to monitor social cues for survival and turning up the circuits that govern planning, discipline, and long-range thinking. This is not metaphor. This is neuroscience. It's like pulling your attention out of 1,000 open browser tabs and putting it back into a clean, focused interface. Your brain stops scanning for social feedback and starts building internal scaffolding for personal growth. You begin to make decisions that are future aligned, not emotionally reactive. You reclaim your cognitive resources, your working memory, your clarity, your focus. And suddenly, you're not spinning in mental loops about someone else's inconsistency. Stanford, you're building, you're becoming, you're locked in on a signal that comes from within. And here's the thing that most people don't realize: the craving for validation, likes, attention, approval, is not weakness. It's biology. It's deeply rooted in the way our nervous systems evolved. Thousands of years ago, being accepted by the group wasn't optional. It was survival. Rejection back then could literally mean death. So your brain developed mechanisms. Fast, reflexive ones to track social belonging. That's the same circuitry lighting up today when someone leaves your message on read, when you're excluded from a group, or when you're not seen the way you want to be seen. The anterior cingulate cortex, a brain region tied to physical pain, also processes social pain. That's why a breakup or being ignored can feel like a punch to the gut. In terms of your brain's wiring, it is. But the problem is we're living in a modern world with ancient circuitry. And if you don't become aware of that, you'll be constantly hijacked, pulled out of alignment by every ounce of social feedback. That's why focusing on yourself isn't about ego or isolation. It's about adaptation. It's about taking outdated neurological programming and updating it through conscious practice. When you realize that not every hit of attention is worth your focus, not every absence is a threat, you begin to unhook from this primal compulsion to be validated. And that's when your clarity returns. That's when your mind stops scanning for signals of acceptance and starts anchoring to what really matters: growth, purpose, direction at Stanford. And what happens when you finally let them go? The ones who drain your energy, who show up inconsistently, who only come around when it benefits them. There's something profound that takes place, not notionally, but neurologically. Your cognitive load drops. That's not just a poetic idea. It's measurable. When you stop fixating on unpredictable people, your brain no longer burns energy running simulations, second-guessing, anticipating rejection, or replaying conversations at 2 a.m. Think about it. Your prefrontal cortex, your brain center for logic and forward thinking, has limited bandwidth. And every time you obsess over someone who isn't aligned with your values or who constantly disrupts your peace, you're depleting that bandwidth. It's called cognitive interference at Stanford. Just like too many apps drain your phone's battery, too many unresolved social dynamics drain your mental energy. But the moment you make a firm decision, let them go. You're not just protecting your peace, you're restoring your brain's efficiency. Neural circuits that were tied up in emotional chaos are freed to focus on creativity, strategy, learning, and growth. This is how mental clarity is built. Not in a vacuum, but by removing noise. Letting go is not loss. It's neurological optimization. It's giving your brain back the space to think, to build, to breathe. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting, because when you stop looking to people for your sense of worth and start measuring progress instead, you begin to rewire your entire reward system. The human brain is designed to seek out dopamine, the molecule of motivation, but the source of that dopamine determines everything about your long-term trajectory. When your hits of dopamine come from someone liking your post, texting you back, or validating your existence, you're creating a dependency loop, a fragile one, because external validation is inconsistent, unpredictable, and ultimately out of your control. But when your dopamine starts coming from internal progress, showing up for your morning routine, finishing a workout, staying locked in on your craft, now you've taken control of the system. You've moved from reactive to proactive. This is a key principle in neuroplasticity. Neurons that fire together wire together. Every time you link satisfaction to your own effort, your brain strengthens that loop. It makes it easier to stay consistent. It makes discipline feel good. And over time, that becomes your default state. Because unlike people, progress doesn't disappear when they get bored. Progress doesn't flake on you. It doesn't send mixed signals. It shows up exactly in proportion to the effort you put in. And that's where real confidence is built, not from being chosen by others, but from choosing yourself over and over again. That's not just a mindset. And here's where the science of focus and reward takes on an even deeper level. Because the moment you begin redirecting your attention from people to process, from validation to self-discipline, your dopamine system starts to rewire itself in a more sustainable direction. And this is not abstract. This is hard neuroscience. Dopamine isn't just about pleasure. It's about pursuit. It's the neurochemical that drives motivation, attention, and effort toward a goal. When dopamine is anchored to someone else's attention, you become reactive. You wait. You check your phone. You adjust yourself to fit into someone else's frame. But when you link dopamine to actions you control, like finishing your workout, making progress on your project, sticking to your morning routine, your brain starts to build what's called contingent reward circuits. These circuits fire not because you achieved the end goal, but because you're moving toward it. This is how real momentum is built. The key is that discipline begins to feel rewarding in and of itself. That's the neurological sweet spot. You no longer need someone else to give you permission to feel good. The small daily wins. Getting up when you said you would, finishing what you started, ignoring distractions, become hits of motivation that reinforce the very behavior that created them. you enter what's called a positive feedback loop of effort. So every time you choose to stay locked in instead of spiraling over who's noticing you, you're not just building willpower. You're reinforcing neural architecture that keeps you focused, driven, aligned. And over time, that becomes your baseline. Not because it's easy and rolls at Stanford, but because it's biologically rewarding to stay in your lane. There's a physiological power in solitude that most people underestimate, because we've been conditioned to equate being alone with being behind. But what actually happens at the level of your nervous system when you embrace time alone is remarkable. Solitude, intentional, focused solitude, triggers neuroplasticity in ways that social noise simply cannot. You remove external inputs and the brain starts consolidating information. It begins to integrate experiences, reflect, and recalibrate. This isn't just emotional clarity, it's structural change in your brain. Your prefrontal cortex, which governs high-level thinking and planning, gets a break from constant stimulus. The default mode network, responsible for self-awareness and introspection, activates. And what does that do? It strengthens your internal narrative. It deepens your identity. It creates space for the kind of long-range vision that's impossible when you're possible in a cycle of social comparison or distraction. Solitude also trains your nervous system to regulate itself. You're no longer relying on someone else's presence, response, or energy to feel okay. That's called autonomic resilience. And it's one of the most powerful things you can build. Because when you can stay centered without stimulation, you gain the ability to act from alignment instead of reaction. And biologically, that's when you begin to shift from being emotionally volatile to neurologically grounded. You're not pulled by the currents of who's showing up or who's not. At Stanford, you're focused. You've trained your system to, when you start letting go of the people who don't serve your growth, something profound happens at the neurological level. It's not weakness or selfishness. It's biological intelligence. See, our brains are wired to conserve energy and avoid unnecessary stress. So when you continue to invest your time and mental resources into people who drain you, and research Stanford, who fail to recognize your worth or who only show up when it's convenient for them, you're effectively burning through cognitive energy. You're activating stress response systems, your sympathetic nervous system, and that is not conducive to progress. But when you consciously choose to let go, whether it's a toxic relationship, a friendship that no longer fits, or the roles at Stanford, or even family dynamics that consistently bring you down, you're giving your brain permission to reset. You're removing stressors that deplete your energy and replacing them with the possibility of personal focus. This isn't about emotional coldness. It's about clearing your mental space so you can perform at your highest level. It's about optimizing your cognitive resources. At the same time, research Stanford, letting go builds what's called emotional regulation. The more you create space for the right relationships and cut ties with the wrong ones, the more your autonomic nervous system learns to stay calm, balanced, and resilient regardless of external circumstances. Your emotional state no longer hinges on someone else's unpredictability or inconsistency. And that's when your nervous system operates from a place of strength, not weakness. This is a form of self-protection. When you let go of what's not serving you, you're activating your prefrontal cortex's executive function, which is responsible for making decisions that prioritize long-term growth over short-term comfort. And what you're doing in that moment is not just letting go of people. It's letting go of emotional attachments to external validation and reclaiming the power to steer your own narrative. This is how you build a life that's not dependent on external factors, but on your internal compass. Now, this is where the real power of focus comes into play. When you begin to prioritize purpose over popularity, mastery over external recognition, something shifts biologically and neurologically. See, the brain doesn't differentiate between the short-term, shallow dopamine hits you get from likes, comments, or the approval of others, and the deeper, more sustained dopamine release that comes from deep work, from skill acquisition, and from making consistent progress toward a meaningful goal. But here's the kicker: the deeper hits, the ones that come from mastering your craft, are far more sustainable and far more rewarding over the long term. When you're focused on something bigger than your social standing, when you stop chasing external validation and begin to chase mastery, your brain's reward system begins to work in your favor. The dopamine released from pursuing and achieving something truly meaningful doesn't just fade quick like a fleeting, like on social media. No, it builds and it compounds every time you make progress. Whether it's perfecting a skill, growing your business, or developing a healthier habit, your brain rewards you with deeper, more fulfilling satisfaction. This is a reward loop you want to be in because it doesn't depend on others. It's based on your own growth, your own evolution. This shift is essential. When your focus is on becoming the best version of yourself, not just in the eyes of others, but for your own growth, you're no longer at the mercy of social trends or fleeting opinions. This focus on mastery and intrinsic progress strengthens neural circuits for long-term thinking, self-discipline, and delayed gratification. Your brain learns that true satisfaction comes from doing the work, from getting better, not from being recognized. And when you experience that deep sense of satisfaction from genuine progress, your neural systems begin to fire in ways that reinforce this pathway. The more you make your success about skill and growth and less about being liked or seen, the more your brain becomes wired for resilience and fulfillment. This is the difference between chasing fleeting applause and building something that lasts. Not just for your reputation, but for your brain's health, your emotional well-being, and for your future. Here's the thing about focus. It's a finite resource. Your attention, your mental bandwidth, your energy, they are not infinite. And in a world full of distractions where every device, every notification, every person wants a piece of your mind, your ability to direct your focus where it truly matters becomes one of your greatest assets. Every time you allow your attention to be pulled in 1,000 directions, whether it's obsessing over someone's opinion of you or getting caught up in the drama of other people's lives, you're wasting cognitive energy. That energy could be used to build your future, to move toward your goals, to master something that truly matters. When you begin to understand this, you realize the cost of distraction is not just time. It's neural energy. The brain's resources are precious. The more you divide your attention, the more your prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for higher level decision making and problem solving, becomes overloaded. This leads to cognitive fatigue, decision fatigue, and ultimately burnout. And as your cognitive capacity drains, your focus weakens, make it harder to stay on track, harder to stay productive, and harder to stay disciplined at Stanford. But when you actively choose to focus on your own path, on your purpose, on your health, on your personal growth, you become much more efficient. Your brain has more energy to allocate to what truly matters. You begin to activate the systems that optimize productivity, the networks that help you stay clear, make better decisions, and take action in alignment with your long-term goals. And with each action you take, you're training your brain to filter out the irrelevant and focus on what's important. Think of it like clearing the static from a radio signal. The more you focus on the signal, the true, purposeful work you're here to do, the clearer the picture becomes. And with that focus, your mental resource becomes more concentrated, more potent. Every decision you make, every action you take, becomes an investment into your future self. And that return, it's exponential. Your brain gets better at focusing. Your progress accelerates, and you start seeing the fruits of your labor, not just in terms of productivity, but in terms of the mental clarity and emotional strength you've built along the way. And this brings us to one of the most powerful, yet often overlooked aspects of focus and growth: legacy. Now, legacy isn't just about what you leave behind in terms of tangible achievements or material success. It's about who you become over the course of your life, how you evolve mentally, emotionally, and physically, and the influence you have, not because of external validation, but because of your unwavering commitment to your purpose. The brain's reward system is designed to seek and reinforce what is meaningful. And when your focus is not on pleasing others, not on fitting in, but on living in alignment with your deepest values, your brain begins to build something far more enduring than social approval. It builds resilience, self-mastery, and a sense of purpose. When you become grounded in your mission, when you stay true to your values regardless of external noise, your brain becomes better at filtering out distractions. You become less reactive to what others think or say because you're so anchored in your own path. This isn't about rejecting social connection or validation at Stanford. It's about shifting your internal compass away from others' judgments and toward what you want to create in this world. And here's the remarkable thing about the brain. It loves certainty. It loves clarity. When you focus on building your own legacy, your brain starts firing in ways that support that vision. You create neural pathways that reinforce your ability to stay true to your mission, to push through discomfort, to prioritize long-term gain over short-term pleasure. This internal clarity leads to a deep sense of fulfillment because you're not just chasing external markers of success. You're creating a life that reflects who you truly are. And when you build that kind of inner stability, it impacts everything. Your relationships improve, your health improves, your work becomes more aligned with your deeper purpose, and your emotional resilience skyrockets. And research at Stanford, people begin to notice that you're not just another reaction to the environment. You've become a force in it. And that's when you build a legacy, one that's not dependent on who stays or who goes, not on who validates you or who critiques you, but on your ability to show up for your own life every single day in pursuit of something greater than external approval. And research rolls at Stanford, and that's the kind of legacy that lasts, the kind of impact that endures. Not because it's popular, because it's real.